Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Jessica Jones, the Cryptid Huntress, and I have a raspy voice today. Okay, so please forgive me for not sounding like myself, but I'm just glad to have a voice, period, right now. I've been under the weather for the past couple of days, and I feel better today, but my voice just has disappeared. And I've done all I can to get it back before the show. And so if you see me drinking my hot tea and my canned water, I've got some water right here. Um, just just ignore it. Okay. I'm just trying to keep my voice. Okay. So thank you guys so much for being here. We have a fantastic topic today, something that's really cool, really scary, actually. Uh, the stuff that nightmares are made of. Okay. And it's the melon head people out of, I guess, Connecticut and Ohio and Michigan as well. Okay, and so we're going to talk about that today. I have Dr. Dennis Carroll here in the studio today. We're going to be really taking a deep dive into the melonhead people, and I think there's some truth mixed with some urban legend with this one. So you guys get ready. We got a great show ahead of us. If you would like to follow along with all of my shows, please go to my website. That's thecryptidhunters.com. You can find me there. All of my shows, all the events I'm going to be at are there. Also, I have a Patreon. That's the Cryptid Huntress over on Patreon. You guys can find me there. And if you'd like to support the channel, that's a great way to do it. So shout out to all my Patreon members. And also, I do have a shop. It's called War Woman Goods, and that's on Etsy. So thank you to everybody who's been throwing your support my way. I really appreciate it very much. Also, I have a channel membership as well. If you guys would like to become a member of my channel, just hit the join button on my YouTube channel. Okay, and thank you to all my mods, everybody that's here in the live chat right now. You guys are the best. Okay, all right. Well, my printer gave out of ink, so I'm going to be going from my computer today, getting all my show notes right here for today. So let me give a little rundown of what we're talking about today, and then I'm going to introduce Dr. Dennis Carroll. Melon heads have long been reported in remote wooded areas of the United States, mostly in Ohio, Michigan, and Connecticut. According to Folklore and eyewitnesses, they are small humanoids with abnormally large heads, and they live in secluded areas, sometimes attacking people who wander into the woods and into their territory. They're said to have small, beady eyes and thin, bony limbs. Some reports suggest they have long, sharp teeth and claws. They possess incredible strength and they're very agile. They're known to move quickly and silently, making them difficult to catch and to spot. And some reports suggest they emit a high-pitched, screeching noise when threatened. Theories and origins of the melon heads range from inbreeding and genetic mutations to hydrocephalus and mad scientist experimentation. Today, we're going to go over the melon heads together with Dr. Dennis Carroll. Dennis has decades of experience with the paranormal, UFOs, cryptids, demonology, you name it, he does it, and he's involved in it in some way. Please help me welcome to the show today our good friend, Dr. Dennis Carroll.
Good afternoon.
Hey, Dennis.
All right. Yeah, this is a really great subject you picked out today, Jessica. This is a really interesting one. And like you said, it is the stuff of nightmares and horror movies. Okay, definitely. I have been to Ohio, and I haven't been to Connecticut and Michigan yet, but I have been to Ohio, and it is a rather rural. A lot of it is a rural area, and a lot of these type of urban legends tend to haunt these back roads and out of the way places in some of these areas. And the melon heads, as they call them, is definitely one of them. There's an interesting thing about this. There is sort of a correlation with this, the melon heads and the rebobs of Napa, California. We've talked about the rebobs. They're supposed to be flying monkeys, by the way. Monkeys with wings, like the Wizard of Oz kind of monkeys. and they inhabit a certain area, and I think the Napa Valley, a certain road, by the way, another rural road kind of thing, and they're supposed to be the product of experimentation too. So that's an interesting correlation you got. And by the way, they make a screeching noise supposedly as well,
Right.
like melon heads. That's kind of interesting how you've got from two different coasts, the west and the east coast, but you've got one that's sort of correlation to it. Now that's a good rendering of that. Now what you're looking at is these are children that have unfortunately supposedly have hydrocephalus. Now that is a medical condition of water, or they're also known as water heads. Yeah, I have seen
Mhm.
children like this. It's very sad. It's very bad, and most of them do not survive this kind of a thing. To me, it is very bad. It's a very bad disease and a condition, and it can affect them very greatly to the point where it inhibits the brain functions the way they should be. And that's the interesting thing about the melon head kids that they talk about. They're always talked about as being very feral and wild, like cannibalistic too. By the way, supposedly they will bite you and eat you. Supposedly in that respect too. So you got a lot of different correlations with this stuff. It's very interesting to see.
You do, and I feel bad calling them a cryptid, okay, because this is an actual medical ailment, okay, and so I do feel bad calling I feel bad calling them cryptids, but I guess there's like an overlap of, well, these are like feral humans potentially that have this disease or this medical condition, but they're also, like you said, cannibalistic. I mean, when I think of the Melonheads, I think of the Hills Have Eyes. That's a movie. It's really creepy. There's several movies that have what could be potentially Melonheads in them. There's actually a movie called Melonheads too, and it's kind of that is the stuff of nightmares, because it kind of brings the, like, feral human aspect, the inbreeding aspect of inbreeding, scientific experimentation as well. So I don't know if it's scarier than Dogman and Bigfoot, but it's pretty creepy on my list. So,
Well,
but every oh, go ahead.
these things are very much just kind of like wild apes to a certain extent. They will attack you from the trees. They will jump you. They jump you back, so to speak. That is very dangerous. If you encounter something like that out in the woods, especially in the dark or late in the day or whatever, and these things are coming at you from the trees and all that, you might your chances for survival go way down. Put it that way. Uh, I have not heard too many stories of Dogman actually jumping on people from trees, but I'm sure it could be done. But that's what the interesting thing about the melon heads, and there's another correlation to it too. Are the especially the skulls found in Peru, where the elongated skulls are very much like this, and we do know without a doubt that most of those things were made by mankind. They were forced to grow that way, and that's an interesting thing about melon heads. Uh, I think when they talk about these being more of an experimentation, so it's not really the disease or medical condition that caused a lot of this. It's that the experimentation caused this to happen to them in that respect.
Ooh,
And when you have hydrocephalus, like I said, it will affect your brain. It does things to your brain and will make you very feral like or very wild. It will make you sort of anti-human in a way, and that's the interesting aspect. So the so-called experiment that brought these things into being, that it deformed their heads that way, and also deformed their minds. And we did a show, the disappearance of Dennis Martin. We talked about feral people, and if these things went feral out in the woods, they would be some of the most dangerous predators you could ever run into.
Well, yeah, it could be. And I like this picture that I found online. This is an interesting representation of melon heads because they say that they're short in stature, depending upon which state that you're in. Okay, because there are three different areas where these things are said to reside. And so I wanted to go over each of those states. Okay, the first one is Ohio. Okay, so we're going to talk about Ohio. Now, we do know that there's a lot of cryptids in Ohio.
Oh,
We have a lot of dogman reports, the grassman reports. You name it, they got it in Ohio, Dennis, I think. Um, but including the melon heads, okay? And so this is the state where they're said to be abandoned children that were abandoned by a scientist by the name of Dr. Crow. He decided to
yeah, Dr.
take care of
Crow.
them, his
Yeah.
facility. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um, he performed horrible experiments on these children, and he injected chemicals into their brain, which caused their craniums to grow grotesquely, like big. And because of this abnormal growth, they did get hydrocephalus, and it caused them to become mentally ill, it said. And after
I
years of abuse, the
the
children
goal
actually unalived him.
the goal of the experiment was to actually increase their brain capacity, but it didn't go quite that way, supposedly. And Dr. Crow, there has been a lot of investigation into Dr. Crow, and we found that no such person really ever existed by that name. That could have been some type of a code name or something like that. But that's very interesting. And here's another correlation with think about when I think about the melon heads. I also have to think a little bit about the puckwudgies. They sound a lot of they have a lot of similar traits. I wonder sometimes if some people could not may misconstrue. They may see a melon head and think it's a puckwudgie or vice versa. You know, that's an interesting thing too, because you do have that prevalent in that area too. But like you said, Ohio's got a lot of strange stuff because, like I said earlier, Ohio is very rural, and it seems these things. Put it this way: melon heads are not going to hang out in the city. Okay, they're definitely going to go to the out of the way places to get away from people. That's just the way all this supposed experimentation went on. Here's the thing I find most interesting about this, Jessica, and I've heard this time after time after time with many different stories in many different areas. Some kind of weird thing is connected with experimentation. And you know, I've talked before about rogue scientists. There are some supposedly rogue scientists out there that are doing some weird things. Some of them trying to find the Z virus. You know what the Z virus is? Turn everybody into zombies, kind of thing. Here's the thing about it. We do know without a doubt that the government funds some of this rogue science that's going on out there, and they're deep into that stuff. So it would not surprise me if the melon heads are really, truly a product of something like that that's going on because we know the CIA and the NRA and all the rest of these NRI and all the rest of them that are involved in this stuff deeply, especially experimentation. That's
Oh, yeah.
that's the interesting part. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We actually just had a show recently on the billywhack monster out of California. And,
Hmm.
uh, and that was actually an experimentation gone wrong, kind of, but it was, I don't know if it was gone wrong. I think they meant for it to be created. It was a goat man, super soldier out of California. So we know, and that was back in the 1920s. Okay, so we know that this has been going on a long time.
Oh, yeah. I study a lot of folklore and I study a lot of these sightings and all this stuff. And when you see indicators like that pop up, I call them the patterns, like experimentation and so on. You pay more attention to it, and that because those are sort of clues of what may be going on with somebody somewhere down the line. Probably did experiment with something like this, and it might have got out of hand. Uh, I'm not going to name the certain virus that we've all dealt with in the past, but that came out of a lab. Okay, come on, it really did. It didn't come out of a bat cave somewhere. It came out of a lab, And you know what? You're dealing with people, Jessica, and people are imperfect. They make mistakes, okay? And when you've got stuff in a lab and you're doing experiments, you can easily make mistakes. Things can be released. Things can get away from you or out of hand with you. That's not that far fetched when you think about it, you
That's
know?
right. That's right. 100%. And yeah, I mean, we talk about all that here with all the chimeras and the underground facilities, even with dogmen as well. Some of the remote viewing targets I've been given over the years. We talk about that kind of stuff. But okay, so Ohio is we've established that it's chock full of cryptids of all kinds there, and probably some experimentation, and probably some tunnels and underground facilities there. And I don't know, the jury's kind of out on whether these, and I say the jury's out because this could be some truth mixed with a lot of urban legend at this point, but people have reported seeing melon heads in Ohio to this day. Okay, and there's some accounts of it, but also in Michigan. Okay, so and the Michigan one is really interesting because there's an actual place. It's called the Felt Mansion, and they're actually seen around this Felt Mansion.
Mm-hmm.
They're said to live there actually, and according to one story, there were originally children with hydrocephalus who lived at the Junction Insane Asylum. So there was an insane asylum. I'm not sure if the Felt Mansion was the insane asylum. Oh, it was near the Felt Mansion actually, so it was near there.
I think it was.
They said that they were actually subjected to physical and mental abuse while they lived out there, and they became feral mutants, is what they're called, feral mutants, and they were released into the forest in the surrounding area out there in Michigan. The Allegan County Historical Society says the asylum never existed, although it was at one point a prison. Okay. But see, if you go back and you look at all these prisons that we have today, a lot of times they or is asylums and prisons. These are like old world architecture buildings. They've been here a lot longer than I think we're told. Okay, and there's no telling. But the historical society says that the insane asylum never existed. However, that was used as a prison. I do have a picture of the Felt Mansion here. If everybody would like to see this, this is where they say that the Melon Heads haunt this place today.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you have these kind of incidents, you will have a what I call an epic center. Something started somewhere there. Might have spilled over into different areas, but there's a beginning for it. And I haven't been in a lot of asylums in my time, not as a inpatient, of course, but I have been there investigating a lot of these places. And I'm gonna tell you something. They're really just like prisons in that respect. They have cells, and all this other things. There's not that big of a difference between asylums and prisons. Absolutely. But you can have these are some of them. Here's another thing. I'm not going to get into demonic stuff today, but that is another aspect of this that we got to think about is that the demonic are drawn to areas like this. This is a bad place, okay? Got a lot of bad emotion, abuse that goes on there. Not just the experimentation we're talking about, but I can see where a lot of this other stuff could have had been some very interesting factors in this too. You've got, I'm going to tell you what, and I don't care if it's prison, asylums, hospitals, you do have some bad actors that engage in the abuse of people like that. Okay, that goes on, unfortunately. When we find those people doing that, of course, we usually take them out of those positions. But think about all the ones we don't find that are doing this kind of stuff, and especially if you're going up against children. Children who have a medical condition or something like that, they really don't know, they don't understand what's going on. And if they get abused, just like, I've talked about this before, you can play with your dog or you can pick on him. You can pick at him and fight him all the time. Eventually, that dog will become unmanageable because of that. That's not the way you play with a dog. Okay, you don't do children the same way. That's just the way. If you abuse children, push them down, become violent and abusive with them, they will strike back against that. That's only natural, you know, that things like that happen.
Yeah, it's really sad to watch or to find stories about young children who were neglected from a very young age and took up with their animals, with their dogs. And some of them, even the story, the Jungle Book, that cartoon, I think it's a Disney cartoon. They talk about it shows the kid that was a feral child that lived out in the jungle with all of his animal friends. And it's really sad. The children end up taking on the characteristics of those animals. And there's a girl somewhere in Europe or Russia maybe that had taken up with her dogs when she was a little kid and became feral. Like that's a whole different type of feral. Okay, because
Yeah. There is a ritual that certain tribes in Africa can do to you if they really want to get you. They put you in a cage. They sew a lion's skin on you. They treat you like a lion, feed you raw meat. You can't stand up. Okay, you're in a cage. Eventually, under this type of psychotic abuse, you will think you have become a lion. You will act and be like a lion. Eventually, it's sort of like a case of brainwashing. You can do this. You can manipulate someone to the point where they lose their identity and their aspect of reality. You're dealing with some heavy psychological type stuff here. That is, it's abuse too. Of course, it is a bad kind of abuse, but that's a lot. Hey, and this is what goes on. We've talked about this in the past, Jessica. Like with some of the Russian experiments and the Medusa thing and all that other thing. A lot of this is going on. There's a lot of experimentation, government experimentation going on with this side of psychotic stuff.
yeah, thank you, Lanita. She says it was Russia. It was Russia. Russia did it. No, it's that's what you're referring to is the young girl who was with the dogs. And yeah, I was thinking about that too, the Russian sleep experiment as well. That was terrifying. I'd like to cover that one day. But it's just really sad um, how humans have been experimented on and continue to be. And even talking with people that have been parts of the secret space program and the things that they've been subjected to, the Montauk Project, we know that humans are treated like animals.
Well,
To a lot of people.
yeah, a lot of this experimentation goes on to this day on apes, dogs. The list of animals goes on. They wouldn't stop at doing that with humans if they can get away with it. That would not surprise me at all that that's not going on. We do know the Nazis were big on that stuff. Dr. Joseph Mengele and all that stuff. And we've talked about this before, and the chimeras and all this other stuff that's tied in with that. And even this goes back to H.G. Wells' day when he wrote The Island of Dr. Moreau. They were trying to hybrid stuff with animals and humans and all that stuff. This is nothing new. Okay, this goes way back. And this experimentation, I know without a doubt, has been carried out in the past and still is being carried out. It's still ongoing. Just like we talk about a lot of these bases, and I believe I have seen what they look like. Okay. These underground containment areas that hold these things. Who knows what's down there and what they have done? Uh, Even like with the Melon Head children, that would have been something probably done above ground. It might not have been done in an underground military base, but there's a lot of that goes above ground as well. Like I talked about the rebobs, that was supposed to be that, and the billy whack that you talk about. All of this stuff took place in these areas. That's experimentation, human experimentation.
I know. And Riley is saying that they believe that Dennis Martin was abducted by a feral human. Well, that's something that you and I just talked about last week. And I do believe he was abducted. I'm not sure if it was a feral human according to the remote viewing data, but I think it was a human. It could have been. It definitely could have been. And there are a lot of people, especially children, going missing out of the United States every year and out of our national parks. And I was given that as a remote viewing target with the clusters of missing people. And that was a blind target where I was seeing people being abducted, experimented on, taken underground into facilities, experimented on, and then being disposed of. Okay, so all this is all connected in some way.
Well, another thing you got to consider too, if they're going to experiment, they wouldn't be with somebody yours or my age. They're not going to come. They're going to go after children. That would be the prime thing to use for your experimentation purposes when you think about it. And there are other aspects of child abduction too that tie into that. And we're not going to get into ritual stuff and all that today, but there's a lot of that going on. I'm not saying every bit of it is that, but I think there are different factors you got to look at or what's really going on with a lot of these abductions. And it could be that the Melon Head kids are definitely tied into something like that. These children could have been abducted to be experimented upon, and the experiments got out of hand, or they could have released them on purpose. You know, here's the thing about. Let me say this about government things, okay? And I have known this to be true in the past. When they get ready to stop something or cease operation on something, they're very sloppy sometimes about cleaning up stuff. Okay. They're very sloppy about that. And they used to be more meticulous about it, but now they're very much sloppy about it. They leave doors open, they leave things undone. They're not very particular how they run stuff. Okay. They don't have a book somewhere they're going by and all this. It just depends on who's in charge and what gets done, especially when it comes to the government.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Just keep your kids safe, everybody. Okay. Always keep an eye on your family and keep your head on a swivel. Okay. Nothing's going to happen to any of our kids. Okay. We got the protection of the white light all over our children here. But I'm just saying, just keep an eye on them because, yeah, y'all know from watching the show.
We've got to realize that human beings, are a commodity in this world. Just like,
Yes.
you go buy pencils at Walmart, you can also put hands on people when you want them. If you've got the power to do it and the auspices to do it, you can do that very easily. And I think that's what's happening a lot of times. A lot of this stuff is a lot of, like you say, it's a lot. I think 90% of everything is done is underground. Okay. Put it that way, because it's out of sight. Look, we have found government installations under abandoned malls. Think about that a moment. It's not just out in some forest somewhere. They're operating right under us sometimes. That's freaky too when you think about it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a whole other world underground and full cities and everything. And so yeah, it's just something else to think about. So all right, let's go to the next state actually, because we have one more state to cover. And wow, there's a lot of great comments today too in the chat. Sorry if I don't get to everybody's comments. I'm just kind of thumbing through and pulling up the ones that I can. Okay, so we've covered Ohio, we've covered Michigan, and now we have Connecticut. Okay, so there's several variations of the melon heads that are found in Connecticut, and they're found in Trumbull, Shelton, Stafford, Monroe, and Seymour, Easton, Weston, Oxford, Milford, and Southbury. That's a lot of sightings in Connecticut. Okay, there's more sightings in Connecticut than there are anywhere. So in the first variation of accounts, I guess you could say, there's another asylum. Okay, so these melon heads come from asylums, Dennis, for the criminally insane. They say that it burned down in the fall of 1960, and it resulted in the death of all of the staff and most of the patients, with 10 to 20 inmates unaccounted for. And the ones that survived ran off into the woods. Okay, so they ran off in the woods. And they say that their appearance today or in the modern day is a result of them having resorted to cannibalism in order to survive the winters. And due to inbreeding, it made them get hydrocephalus. Okay, hydrocephalus. According to the second variation, it says they're descendants of a colonial era family from Shelton, Trumbull, who were banished after accusations of witchcraft were made against them, causing them to retreat into the woods. So they were accused of being witches. Um, they actually turned to inbreeding. Okay, so in Connecticut, they're pretty much all associated with inbreeding there. So I don't know what you know about this, Dennis, but they seem to be spotted a lot more often, and there's a lot more of them up in Connecticut.
Well, there is an interesting aspect of witchcraft that does have to deal with cannibalism. Okay, there is a lot of that goes on in actual witchcraft. A lot of people don't realize that, but it's not just blood sacrifices thing and all that. They do something with the sacrifice after they do that. Okay, and usually most of the time they partake of the body. It's sort of a backward way of doing sort of the sacrament, you know. But it's a corruption of the sacrament. I'm not going to get into that today, but that's an interesting aspect of that. And I have to wonder, this kind of sounds a lot like Sawney Bean. We talked about Sawney Bean, the cannibalistic family. It was a very large family that was in Scotland that was wiped out by the military finally. But they were involved in stuff like that. And some of these melon head kids are supposedly inhabiting cave systems. That's been talked about a little bit too. If I were going to kidnap you, Jessica, I would do it by taking you down underground. You'd never be found again if I could take you underground, definitely. Or put you in a cave or something like that somewhere. It makes sense when you think about that. And let's just say you were doing some of these kind of experiments, you would make some of your holding areas definitely would be caves and places like that. That would be out of the way. A good place to contain someone, natural containment, I call it, because the cave is already there. That makes sense too when you think about it. But I find that interesting that there's a connection with cave systems in these guys as well.
Speaking of caves, I have my good friend Drewski is in the chat today, and he and I were both on the Confessionals podcast last night. And Drew is with Cryptid Warfare Podcast. You guys, please go over and subscribe to Cryptid Warfare Podcast and hit him up. He's one of the guys I went on the Skinwalker Cave expedition with, and the Dogman Hunt in Alabama, and we did some cave exploring together and with the team. And that's some of the scariest cryptid investigating I've done was down deep in that cave. I didn't get nearly as deep as he did and the rest of the guys, but you just don't know what's on the other side. I mean, the caves are never ending. The cave that we went in, there was no end to it, and it was up in Tennessee. Lots of places to hide. Okay, hide, and
Yeah,
there could be anything in there.
it's the perfect hiding place, and I've directed
Yeah,
people to look. And if I were out actively looking for something in the field, and I've been a field researcher for many, many years. I've spent a lot of time out in the woods and caves and places, tunnels and all that stuff. That's where you go look. Okay, you don't just limit yourself to the woods or the forest. You got to look everywhere. Okay, everywhere, wherever it may be, and that includes caves. But I say that is the perfect hiding place. I would direct if you've got a cave system somewhere in there. That's definitely where you got to look, because that would be area. I call it hiding place area number one. Okay, that's the perfect place to go. And if I were melonhead kids wanting to hide out or operate in an area, I would definitely find me some caves from which to do it.
oh yeah, it's a great place to hide. Actually, um, it'd be a great place to get away from the bad weather too. And by the way, a lot of people are talking about the hurricane that's about to hit. So our prayers go out to everybody who's in the line of that storm. Me and Dennis are actually right in the line of that storm as well. So I'm up here in Northwest Georgia, Dennis is in South Carolina, and so I know. I think Derek's in the chat. He's down there, and Don's in the chat as well. Seeing that he and Donnie Miller are in that line right there. That's around where it's going to hit. So you guys, please stay safe. Okay, stay safe and check in with us after the storm hits. Okay, let us know you're okay. After that, because in Georgia we'll just get a bunch of rain, I'm sure. But yeah, it's not. It wouldn't be a bad time to have an underground bunker, right? Or something underground. But anyways, yeah, my thoughts and prayers are with everybody that's in Florida. And so y'all take care of yourselves down there for sure. Okay. Well, I wanted to go talk a little bit about what's going on now, or like what the aftermath was kind of the Melon Heads up in Ohio. Okay, because they say that Dr. Crow was unalived by those patients. Okay, so the ones that he experimented on actually took his life at some point, and so that's they ended up cannibalizing him, from what I understand, and ended up cannibalizing anyone that they come across. So,
Well, supposedly, that was what you're talking about there, Jessica, was supposedly part of the government cover up to
okay,
cover up what happened and all that stuff. Was actually, like I said, we investigated Dr. Crow by that name. There was no one by that name. But like I said, that could have been a code name or something. You never know about that. When the government goes
oh,
in to cover up these things, they go in and cover up this kind of stuff. Here's what they do. Here's part of the cover up. We got to understand this is putting out what? Misinformation. That's the way you work. That's the way the government works. They work with disinformation and misinformation. They do that to distract you, and also, of course, to fool you into believing something else, whatever they want. It's a psyops kind of a thing. That's what it is. That's we talk a lot about psyops, and it's not just holograms and stuff. It's playing with people's perception of reality. That's what it basically is, and that's what the government cover-ups are. If this went on and it did happen, and there seems to be some evidence to it that maybe there's some, where there's smoke, has got to be a little fire, definitely somewhere. If this really went on, they definitely, if they had a cover up, they did institute some type of disinformation or something to distract it. We know whenever we investigate stuff like this, just especially when there's a governmental factor involved in this, gotta remember one thing: what they're not talking about is what you gotta.
right,
That's it.
yeah,
That's the thing. It's a telltale thing.
that's right. Well, they usually will put out a lot of the truth, but they mix it with some lies. Okay, some stuff that's not true, and so it keeps everybody confused. It keeps everybody searching. Okay, and so it's just a mix. That's part of the psyop, is what they call that. I guess a psyop, or any intelligence officer would let you know that's what the real deal is. Okay, and okay, so there's actually kind of a similar story in
Do you,
Michigan
do
for
you
the.
remember?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you remember the story of the Spartans who would go into
Yes.
battle? They would take their swords and hit their shields as they marched. That terrible sound was a psyops. Okay, that was a way to kind of freak your enemy out. We know the Aztecs did that with the death whistle. So this has been practiced for thousands of years. This is nothing new. But the government is very good at doing that kind of stuff. And what they're trying to do, I think, with stuff like this, they're trying to distract us, get our mind off on one thing and put it on something else. I think a lot of things you see happen in the news, I'm not going to get into that today, but a lot of stuff that happens in the news, things that are happening out there in the world, a lot of them are distractions. They're purposeful distractions. They're done that way on purpose to distract us from what they don't want us to see.
Well, we see that in the news every day. Every day there's another scandal, right? It's like a scandal. We're all looking at the scandal. Everybody's really focused on that, but it's like, well, what is the wizard doing behind the curtain? Like, who is the wizard? What are they really hiding? What is this a distraction from? And I think a lot of us critical thinkers, we're onto it. We know. Hey, we know. But it's like, well, what can you do? There's always some kind of something going on. for
Yeah.
sure. We just got to keep ourselves safe, keep our family safe, and stay
And that's the
safe.
thing about the
Okay,
government,
stay
though.
safe, y'all.
One thing we can depend upon the government to do, they can screw up. Okay, they do screw up. They mess up. And I think that's when we see stuff like the Melon Heads and stuff like that is their screw ups that that they didn't cover up the way they wanted to, or whatever the situation is. I think a lot of that's going on in the world today, and I think you and I, investigators like you and I and some of my other friends and all that, we're out there looking for the truth. We see some of this stuff. We know what they're doing and how they're doing it, but the general public is oblivious to this to that extent, and that's the way they want it. Though that's the way they want to play their game.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I got to tell you, the Melonhead children out of Michigan sought retribution. They went out for vengeance. Okay, so I did want to touch on this before we go today because they said that they actually ended up devising a plan to unalive that doctor there too. So these are similar stories in two different states.
Could
Okay,
you blame
but
them?
they,
Could you really blame them?
I know, not at all.
Somebody do you that way, you're gonna kind of want to get a little revenge on them too. I can kind of see where they're coming from on that.
They
Definitely.
did. Well, okay, so it said that they actually unalived the doctor. They cut his body into little pieces and they hid them around the mansion, the Felt mansion. Okay, that picture that I showed earlier. It says that teenagers who had broken into the mansion today see ghosts. It's actually a pretty popular destination for ghost hunters now. And they see that there's shadows, shadow beings, shadow figures, and a light. They say there's lights that come out of the house when they don't have any lights on and things like that. Um, but that's actually what they based that movie out of 2011 on, called The Melon Heads. Okay, and it's based on that legend there.
I'll have to
But
check that movie out, definitely.
eh,
But yeah, according to the reports, they actually saw a repetition of the murder in the shadows of the room there where it supposedly took place. That's very interesting. So you've got spiritual research blending into the cryptid thing here. That's interesting too. Um, to me, that I mean, I have been in certain situations where shadows and stuff like that show up supposedly at murder scenes and stuff like that. That's an interesting aspect of it too. But like I say, I can't blame them for taking out revenge on somebody doing that to them. But that was supposed to be part of their nature as well, though. They turn these little children into monsters. That's basically what happened. And your average monster doesn't act like a good person. They do some bad things. They either unalive you or cut you up or eat you or whatever the situation is. And that's what these little melonhead kids are supposedly doing. They're being the little monsters that they created.
oh yeah. Well, it reminds me of that movie, and there's a book called The Lord of the Flies. Okay, and it's where the kids were left. I guess they were abandoned on an island together or something. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I watched it, but they kind of turn animalistic in a way too. And I don't know, just it kind of reminded me of that scenario with the kids escaping to the woods and having to fend for themselves. Okay, and seeing the retribution, I think that the doctor did deserve that. Okay, I think he did. But it does make for an interesting urban legend, which people do claim to have seen some of these actual melon heads to this day. There are several accounts actually, and there are actual roads. I mentioned like 6 or 7 different cities and counties in Michigan, or
Um,
no, Connecticut. I mean, excuse me, where there have been sightings,
one of them,
and
one of the roads is called Dracula Drive.
that's
That's the
right.
name they gave it. That's not actual the real name, but that's the name they gave it. That's a very rural road too. I think most of these are dirt roads in the woods that they're talking about. These supposedly where this takes place at. And when you look at the melonhead kids, and I've said this before about people who supposedly lose their soul or sell their soul. They get rid of their humanity, and the humanity of these little kids was taken away from them. So they're gonna head for the woods. They're gonna be like animals. They're not human anymore longer in that respect. Okay, and that's where you're coming from. And these things are definitely going to go out of the way somewhere, away from people in rural areas and all that. But here's the interesting thing. If you and you know, you and I, we spend a lot of time out in the woods. When you track animals, whether it be deer, Bigfoot, dogman, whatever, you find a lot of the tracks where on trails. Even animals take trails. Okay, they don't like to just go. They will go off in the bush, but I'm just saying they like trails because it's easier to walk on a trail. It's easier to move on a trail. I have seen a lot of signs on trails. Well, also melon head kids would be the same way. They would hang out around roads and stuff like that. Did you know if you look, here's what I tell people a lot of times, and I'm going to get into the cryptid thing in a moment. If you're looking for a cryptid, whatever it may be, there's two main places, besides a cave area or whatever, there's two main places you want to look for, okay? And that's around roads and what? Water. Because they're going to sooner or later come to either one of them, okay? That includes, look at all the sightings of Bigfoot and Dogman. Where do they most of the time are seen? Not
On the
out in the
road.
woods somewhere. They're on a road somewhere. That's where you see this. They're taking roads just like you and I would do, Jessica. So would melon-head kids. They would hang around roads, places you can easily traverse. It makes sense when you think about it.
It does. It does. And Dawn was asking about Hellier, Kentucky, and asking if I had ever remote viewed some, I think it's aliens or ETs up in, maybe it's Kentucky. There was a comparison to the Melon Heads and the Kentucky goblins that I read somewhere. And I did remote view that. I think that the Kentucky goblins were actually extraterrestrials, I think. And they did have a UFO involved with that case as well. And I think this is something different. But they were compared to the Kentucky goblins at some point in an article that I read. Uh, Something else I find very interesting. Excuse my voice,
Well,
y'all.
if you
Go
make
ahead.
that connection too, a lot of times you could think of the melon heads very much like the grays that people were talk about. They have big heads too. And that's an interesting comparison when you think about that. Uh, to that as well. That's very interesting.
Okay. Well, you're gonna like this, Dennis. I don't know if you're gonna like it or think it's crazy. What about Aleister Crowley
Uh,
and that demon alien that he channeled?
mhm.
Could that be? I'm
Well,
not saying they're related, but it made me think of that.
well, here's the interesting thing. If you look at that picture, that is an actual rendition of a demon. And demons are described a lot of times as looking like that. They have a big head. They have an unnaturally large head. Okay. They look very much like the grays that people talk about. They can look like that sometimes. That's one of their images they put forth. And if you look very closely, if you were like very close to something like that or a demonic entity, if you could get up close, look to it, you will see its reptilian nature. It doesn't look like an alligator. Okay. When we talk about reptilian looking things, especially when it in reference to the demonic, they're not like an alligator or a dinosaur looking thing, okay? They're more like that, but more reptilian. In other words, they have a reptilian like skin, and maybe the mouth is more reptilian. Maybe they've got teeth. That's very much, and you're talking about usually something with a misshapen head like that.
Wow. Well, that's I just thought it was a interesting comparison, actually. So, and also, some people believe that the melonheads are actually evil spirits that live in the woods. They're not actual human beings, but they're a spirit or something that's very demonic. So that kind of could connect that entity that Crowley was channeling with
Well,
what some people think the melonheads are.
here's something else you got to consider. What if these melon head kids were unalived and what you're dealing with is their vengeful spirits?
Dang. Yes.
Interesting.
That's why I like the way you think. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Gosh, I didn't think of that, but yeah, could be. It adds another layer to the mystery of what the melon heads are. I mean,
Mhm.
it's really sad. Okay, it's
That would
very
make
sad.
that would make them even more dangerous, Jessica, because you can't
Yeah,
kill a spirit; it's already dead. That's the
that's
problem.
right.
When you come up against vengeful spirits, you can't unalive them. They're not alive. That's the problem. And if you were to run into something like that, that are really the spirits of these little monsters or whatever that they have become, that would be downright very dangerous.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. I mean, I've actually posed the question before if Sasquatch and Bigfoot could be ghosts. Okay, if dogmen could be ghosts, because we get reports and videos of dogmen or alleged dogmen, some Bigfoot that they're kind of transparent or they're a blur, you know, and I do
Well,
believe
here's
they don't move at the
an
same speed
aspect.
that we do.
Another aspect.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
but yeah,
another aspect
could be
we need to
spirit.
look at as investigators. Okay, looking into these things, and that is that you're kind of freezing up a little bit there. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Uh,
It's okay.
Another aspect we look at when you look at cryptids, are you looking at the real deal, or is it something of a more spiritual nature? And if these things are interdimensional in some way, or they have gone interdimensional, and I think you have to be interdimensional to a certain extent to become spiritual energy. Okay. I'm not going to get too deep into the technological aspects of all this, but you're not fully physical in our realm of existence. Then you are spiritual. Okay. Just like you, if you were melonhead kids or dog men or whatever, you got to understand that aspect may be there. That's what you're dealing with. So that's why a lot of times I think people say, "Oh, I shot dog man 4 or 5 times and he didn't even flinch." Maybe because what you're shooting is not physical in that aspect. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and I like this comment from Dan. Hey, Dan, the different realms are converging, and overlaps and bleed throughs are happening, and that's totally true. I believe that too. Um, we're there. The veil has thinned so much, or either there is no veil so much now. Although I know that's happened in the 1970s. A lot of these sightings were from the 1970s, uh, which was what 50 years ago, 40 years ago. So it's been a while, but still, I mean, even if they're being seen today,
Well, see, here's
there
the
could be.
bad thing that if you come up against
Yeah.
something, if you're coming up against something that's not physical, no matter what kind of gun you got, what kind of weapon, it's not going to affect them. You know, you're wasting your time, okay? Because you're trying to kill something that's not actually alive. That's a bad situation to get into. And I have to wonder how many times, all my years of research into spiritual matters and stuff like that, I have to wonder how many times when you're really dealing with something that's not corporal, something that is spiritual in nature, something that you may not can harm. And, a lot of times,
Uh-oh. I think Dennis is frozen. Okay. And I know we've got storms coming through. It's raining here at my house right now. So, Dennis, if you unfreeze, come back to us. Okay. Yeah, this is probably going to happen, you guys. For the next couple of days, we've got a lot of storms coming through, and so your favorite podcasters may have some technical difficulties from here on out. So it might actually be a good thing for me because I can get some rest. Okay, I've been going pretty hard
we went
working the
out
paint.
for what
There he is.
for a minute.
Yeah, there you are,
I
Dennis.
think a lot of times, some of the stuff that we're dealing with, some of the things that we're seeing, may be the ghost of things, or sort of the echoes of memories of these things that still exist. you have to wonder what you're really dealing with. Okay, a lot of times it's very interesting.
Yes. Yeah, we just don't know what we're dealing with a lot of the times. And so I love how we can keep an open mind about everything. And I love your perspective, Dennis, as to whether what if they are from another realm. And I love that because when you hear about the melonhead people, it seems more like a three-dimensional type of, like a human potentially, that it's just gone through like inbreeding and experimentation. But it could be something completely different. It could be a spirit. It could be a demonic spirit.
Yeah,
Uh,
worse, if you were to subject someone to something like that, it would definitely have a spiritual toll upon them as well. Put it that way. It would definitely really screw around with them spiritually. Uh, well, like I said before, when you take the humanity away, they're no longer human. You're dealing with a different animal altogether.
that's true. That's true. Um, well, let's see. I don't know. Let's see if we got anything else on my list. I don't have a printer that works, so I have to go back to my computer and look at my notes here. Um, I think we've covered pretty much everything on my end, Dennis. What do you have any more thoughts on the melon heads for today? I know I'm not going to make this a long show because I need to go rest my voice. I'm actually going to be Dave Scott. I'm supposed to be a guest on Spaced Out Radio tonight, so I need to go. I need to keep my mouth shut for the rest of the day. I guess until tonight. Do you have any final thoughts, Dennis, on the melon heads?
Well, I think that, like I've said before, every myth and legend known to mankind has a authentic foundation. Somewhere this got started. And I think it was due to government experimentation, absolutely, because we know a lot of that has gone on in the past and still is ongoing in our present time. So I think that, like I said earlier, where there's smoke, there's definitely some fire, and I think there's some fire with the Melonhead kids because I can see them being used as the perfect type of experimentation on something like that. Like I said before, it will be kids. If they get tired of trying it out on puppy dogs and monkeys, they're definitely going to go to humans. Okay, absolutely. And I think maybe that is where this all began. I think that is where the smoke is for this fire.
For sure. I mean, legends and lore don't come from nowhere. Okay, and that's where my team, we one of my well all of my teams, we like to go investigate areas that have local legends and lore because of this. Okay, because where there's smoke, there's fire, just like you said. And if there's a legend of a local ghost, like a ghost road or
Mhm.
something, there's usually Bigfoot in the area. There's usually ETs or UFOs or something, pig man, goat man, you name it. There's something out there. So, lucky for me, I've not heard of any
Yeah, so
melon
I think
heads in Georgia yet.
a lot more to these things sometimes than we truly realize. That's why, as investigative researchers in the field, we need to go in deep as possible to explore all the different ramifications of these things, whatever they may be.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, well, we're gonna keep on their trail. Okay, we've always have our ear to the streets here in the cryptid community, Dennis. You and I. And I always have a really good time talking with you about this. Although this is it's kind of sad if these are actual children that were abused and experimented on. I have a hard time calling the melonhead people like cryptids, okay, because we just don't know exactly what they are. We only hear stories about what they could be. However, there have been a lot of sightings, especially in Connecticut, of this type of person, these little people. So, so yeah, so everybody, um, y'all please stay safe out there. Okay. I know we got this hurricane coming in today, tomorrow, whenever it's gonna hit. Um, I haven't been watching the news lately, but I do know there's a big storm coming. And so I want everybody to please stay safe. Uh, Stay safe from the cryptids. Stay safe from the hurricane and the weather. Just stay safe, okay? And I'm gonna go get me some more hot tea and rest my voice. And you guys, please come and see me tonight. If my voice is better, I will be on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott tonight, over at Spaced Out Radio on
And
YouTube. Yeah. And Dennis, what do you
thing
have
is
going
to
on?
rest your voice as much as possible. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And Dennis, you have a show tonight. Tell the audience about your YouTube channel and your show.
Yes, on Hunting the Shadows tonight, I'll be doing CIA werewolves. Okay, you might want to check that out. That'll be 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Hunting the Shadows. And then Friday night on Paranormal Point of View, our friend Drew Winsky will be my special guest on Paranormal Point of View. That's 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Paranormal Point of View on the Hunting the Shadows YouTube channel. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at denniswcarroll.com. And also, if you need to email me, that's denniswcarroll@gmail.com. That's where you reach me.
Okay, let me put that up there. Yes, Drew was in the chat today. That's Drew Ski of Cryptid Warfare Podcast. And like I said, he and I were both on the Confessionals podcast last night. So y'all go check that out. If you missed it, go check that out. The Cryptids, I'm not the Cryptids, the Confessionals podcast. We talked about all of the hunts that we've been on and some more hunts that Drew and T had been on without me as well. So that was a great time. But everybody, yeah, go hang out at Hunting the Shadows tonight on YouTube. Meet me in the chat. Okay, I'll be there in the chat tonight. But Dennis, thank you so much again for being here. I want to thank everybody for being here and being a part of this today. This has been a wonderful show. Definitely had a great time. And stay safe out there. And I will see you guys tonight over on Dennis's channel. And then hopefully, if my voice comes back, I will be at Spaced Out Radio tonight. All right, everybody. Dennis, have a wonderful day. Y'all have a good night and stay safe. All right, bye. Y'all.